the whole concept of listening to an interview and it's causing you to think in a different way. Like, to be completely transparent, that's the whole purpose of Black Fathers Now. So it's Black Fathers Now, but the reality is this is really more so about personal development. It's about decision making. It's about figuring out who you are and then having the courage and the confidence to step into that. And to me, what I've come to realize is by really having conversations with eclectic brothers from all over the world, from all walks of life, there are solutions for your life, anybody's life who's listening to this, embedded into their journeys and stories. And those solutions literally can be found in this conversation we're gonna have today. And this conversation we're having today is with my frat brother, Frank Shanklin Jr. Now, this brother's a father, he's an entrepreneur, he's an investor, he's an HBCU graduate, but he's also president and CEO of Shanklin and Sons, right? Shanklin and Sons? Yes.
Shanklin and Sons Flooring.
Shanklin and Sons Flooring. And what's interesting about it, back in the day, before I, became a member of this illustrious fraternity, I remember scanning through a Black Enterprise. And I remember going through Black Enterprise and I saw this dude that I had seen around the city of Knoxville highlighted in Black Enterprise. And I was just like, yo, this is kind of interesting. There's something to this brother. And the brother that I'm talking about is my man right here, Frank Shanklin Jr. What's up, bro?
Man, not too much, man. How you doing? I appreciate you having me on and everything.
Man, dude, like I said, I saw you this is something that I've been thinking about for years. I want to have you on to kind of share your journey. Because again, back in the day growing up, I used to always be that dude who was just like, man, I want to be in Black Enterprise. I want to be in Black Enterprise. Then you start meeting dudes who are actually in Black Enterprise and you one of them.
Right. Well, it was a blessing in disguise and everything being on that article. I remember when it came out and remember doing the interview and them sending the camera folks and all that type of stuff, man. But it kind of jumped our business a little bit. That's when we kind of got out of, we're still in the Knoxville, Tennessee market, but we ended up going down into the Atlanta area and Georgia area and some of the other parts of the Southeast. So it was really a good article, man. And I'd like to look at it as it also helped shed some light on other Black businesses that were here in the Knoxville area.
And it's interesting because again, we're in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Knoxville, Tennessee is not Memphis. So it's not known as being a Black city. It's not known as being kind of a mecca for Black entrepreneurship and Black folks doing it. But the reality is we have folks like yourself who are really doing amazing things in this particular area. And again, this is something that spans all over the world, but just for people to kind of wrap their mind around, we have, everybody hears Atlanta, they hear Memphis, they hear New York, LA, the Bay Area, Miami, but they don't always hear these little gems in which folks that look like you are doing the doggone thing in the realm of business.
Right. Well, that's true. But if you look back in the history of Knoxville, before regentrification and all this stuff kicked in, there was a lot of Black businesses. They often talk about the history of the old city in Knoxville, if you're familiar with that, and how that was just lined up back in the 30s and 40s and the 50s with just Black businesses, whether they were doctors and lawyers, accountants, or tavern owners and tailors and things of that nature. So we, as Black business owners in the city of Knoxville, have been very integral in the growth of this city. I just think over time, Black entrepreneurship just kind of fell off to the side for the simple fact that you had the desegregation laws, which allowed a vast majority of Black folks to go and get federal jobs or what you call the good jobs at plants and things of that nature. So that generation, which is probably around my dad's age, they just didn't pursue the entrepreneurship dream. What they did was went and got a job, right? If they went to go to college or not, that's what they did, was got a job that we weren't afforded back in the day. But we lost a generation of entrepreneurship. Ooh. And then at the same time, we just don't view entrepreneurship. I think we do it better now than we did back then. You might see the local shade tree mechanic, and we just call them shade tree mechanic, but that same mechanic has put kids through school and was a viable part of the economics of the town. But we just didn't see it like that. Or if you see a plumber, how often do people say, man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to climb under houses and get all muddy and dirty. But he's an entrepreneur. He's providing for his family and for himself, and and hiring folks that look like us and teaching that trade. So we have to get our minds back wrapped around on really the heartbeat of the Black community, in my opinion, is Black entrepreneurship.
Ooh, fellas, I hope you paid attention to that. The heartbeat of the Black community is Black entrepreneurship. And what's interesting, as you were talking, one of the things that really resonated to me was the whole concept of story and narrative and how we define things. Because again, now entrepreneurship is sexy, meaning like you go, like when I go and speak at a college or whatever, every little young guy at the college wants to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a boss. I want to be my own boss. I want to, because this is what they're seeing on social media. This is the story that's being told, which is good. You know what I'm saying? But to your point, there was a generation or two that were lost in the whole entrepreneurship pursuit because the narrative was different. And to your point, it's funny even thinking about it growing up, like you mentioned the shade, we use the shade tree mechanic, but you're just like, yo, this brother owns the thing, he owns the land, he owns the garage, he employs 30 or 40 people sometimes, he done sent multiple generations of kids to college, and he probably got a bank account that don't look too bad if you're really honest about it, but we call him a quote unquote shade tree mechanic.
That's right. But at the same time, you're showing up to get your car fixed.
There you go. So it's a narrative, and it goes back to narrative and story. And I think this is why it's so important, especially for Black men, to have conversations that go beyond the surface of what's the stuff I got, car I drive, and house I live in, but to really get into the nuances, because these narratives or these stories are so important for us to grab a hold of, to really embed into how we operate. And to me, that kind of leads into how we like to start the interviews here, is with shout outs, because our narrative and our stories don't start like right now, or your narrative or story didn't start as president and CEO of Shanklin and Sons Flooring. It came from before that, and you had a whole lot of people in your life that helped to influence you. Give a shout out to those folks that kind of help you to be who you are on a regular basis, brother.
All right. Well, I would first have to give a shout out to my father, because his hard work ethic. Growing up, my dad, he was not an entrepreneur, but man, he worked 3 jobs growing up. You know, he worked at the plant during the day. The man worked as a lifeguard back in the day, they called it. And then he was a janitor at, late night. So he was doing all this stuff, and he was a college educated man, but due to the circumstances, he was always bypassed for the promotions. He was he was just as smart as as those before him, but he, was always bypassing. So he made up the money by just, working. So I have to give him a shout out, because growing up and you see that, well, you learn the value of just hard work. You learn the value of you're not going to necessarily get treated right, but you just got to keep pushing through. So he's definitely my big shout out. I have to give a shout out to my mother, because she was the one that knew how to manage money. She could take a penny and stretch it out, and all of a sudden it became $1. And she would sit us down at an early age, me and my siblings, and we learned how to just stretch $1 out, how to manage your money, how not to be wasteful with it, and things of that nature, So she has to get a shout out. And then I have lots of uncles, for whatever reason, they just never have been employed by anyone. So the entrepreneurship, I believe, was instilled in myself by just watching them and asking questions. And they would, in turn, when I was back home in Kentucky, they would take me on some of these jobs. And it wasn't the most elaborate businesses that they had. They would find odd end type of stuff. Like I had one uncle, and he had that little cleaning thing that would run around and clean the parking lots. Well, folks were laughing, but he owned 4 or 5 of those things, and had folks going around to the Walmarts and the J.C. Penney's and the Sears and Roebucks at the time. And he was cleaning all those parking lots and making a good living. Had another uncle who was a farmer, but at the same time, he was one of those mechanics and a body shop owner. So you go in there, and he helped teach me the trade of being a body shop guy, doing upholstery and all that type of stuff. And then I had a couple more uncles that into landscaping, and a few more, they into the upholstery business. So they sold new and used furniture. They did upholstery. They taught me and my cousins how to do the upholstery. And that subsequently was what got me into the flooring business and everything. So all of them folks are people that I would just really have to give a shout out to. And then there's several professors along the way at Knoxville College that just pushed me to do better and not be average. And they talked about entrepreneurship. And back before it became a popular thing, a lot of the professors were talking about training people to graduate to own a business, not to just work for other folks. So that was some of the things that I came out with after graduating from Knoxville College as well.
You know, it's interesting. Again, it goes back to what we mentioned before, the power of narrative, the power of telling stories, and the power of how you position things. Because, you know, there are two things that really stood out in your shout outs that we'll probably dive into, I guess, when we get into your origin story and, you know, your journey, so to speak. But you mentioned that your dad always worked, but he was always passed up for promotions. But then the other side of that is you always had uncles who were always business owners and entrepreneurs. So it's kind of like you had the side who owned their stuff, they owned their business. Yeah, they might not have had a sexy business, but it was a business that provided for their family and all of that. And you had this hardworking father who worked for other people, but always seemed to get passed up for the promotion. And so it's kind of like this soup mixed together, how that influences you down your trajectory of, yo, I got to own something.
Right. Yeah. Well, coming out of college, you know, I worked for the state. I was a probation officer, and did that for several years. But I got passed over for a couple of promotions that I just knew I should have had. I was more educated than the folks that got the job. I was definitely a better employee, I thought, than the folks that got the job. And during that time is when I just really started getting into, hey, I'm gonna have to do something different because I'm not gonna continue this cycle like this, you know, and everything. And that's when, you know, the flooring thing kind of took off. And once it kind of grew and I gained a couple of pretty good little contracts, that was it for me, man. I knew it was time to go. You know?
So take it back a little bit though. So you mentioned the flooring thing just took off, and you know you were a probation officer after college and all of that. But you mentioned Knoxville College numerous times, and so we definitely like to celebrate, you know, HBCU education because, you know, especially throughout history, the vast majority of Black folks who were college educated went the HBCU route. Talk to us a little bit about growing up, what led you to Knoxville College, and then, you know, talk to us a little bit about what really, you mentioned some of the inspirations with your uncles, but what really inspired you to get into flooring, you know, as you move forward?
Well, starting out, you know, I originally started out by attending Kentucky State University. I went there on a athletic scholarship and did very well and things of that nature. But along the way, once I was going into my junior year, then my mother became real sick and everything with cancer and everything. So and then about a couple months after she got diagnosed, my father had a stroke. Well, my intentions were really just to go back home for a semester and allow my younger brother to get ready to go to school. And he ended up going off to Morris Brown. Well, that semester turned it into a year because right after that, it was time for my sister to leave for school. So my parents were still kind of healing from their illnesses and things of that nature. So my sister ended up going to Tennessee State. My brother was down there at Morris Brown. He did a year, but then he came on back to kind of help out with everything as well. And I didn't know we were here in Knoxville, Tennessee at that time because my dad's job transferred him here. But I never knew anything about Knoxville College, to be honest about it. But once I found out it was HBCU, I wasn't initially going to go back to school. I was just content that I was just going to get a job. And I had little part-time jobs. I was a cook at Cracker Barrel. I think during the morning, I worked for a roofing company. I worked at an ice plant here, you know, and everything. I was a janitor. And man, you know, at a young age, when you're 19, 20 years old, you really think you got everything that you need, you know, and you're just having a good time, and you got a car, and you got a little pocket change with you, so you just do that. But, you know, man, I met a lady, and she was the admissions counselor at Knoxville College when I was at Cracker Barrel, and she just came in with her husband at the time to eat, Miss Carolyn Scott. She since passed on, but Miss Carolyn Scott. And I was back there cleaning them dishes and everything. And she just kind of just kept looking at me. So she said hi, I said hi. And she just stopped me and said, young man, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm working. She said, well, what are you doing with yourself? I said, well, I'm working, you know, and she kind of had a brief conversation about, you know, you look like you got a little smarts about you. And, you know, you ought to consider going back to school. So she left and everything and came back the following week. They always did breakfast there. And then one morning, right when she got ready for breakfast, she asked me what time I was getting off from work, and I told her. And I got off and she was back in there, and I had said something to the effect like, oh, you came back to get dinner or something. And she said, no, I really came back so I could talk to you and find out which direction you're trying to go, because there's just something about you. And we had a long conversation about where I started and talked about me and my athletics and all that type of stuff, and talked about high school. My grades were good, you know, and all that type of everything. And she was basically trying to recruit me and convince me to continue my education at Knoxville College. And I told her I would come and check it out, didn't do it. And then she came back and told me and convinced me to at least register for one class. And I told her I'll come and do one class. And she got me up in there and had me full about 15, 16 hours. And then she told me, you got to make a decision to quit one of these jobs and everything. And she worked hard and found me some money so I wouldn't have to struggle with, you know, making payments and everything to the school and all that, and got me a little work study here and there. So I would have to also include her in my shout out, that she was the one that really, you know, got on the path to getting me back in school. And along the way, she became really good friends with my father and my mother. And she just told them that she's gonna make sure I'm gonna get taken care of and everything.
Dude, I'm gonna tell you what's so powerful about just hearing that. You know, you have this person, this lady who sees something in you, and it's interesting. And this is why it's so important for us as we become elders to find up and coming folks and make sure we pour into them and identify opportunities, because it ain't what even the dog pound said, it ain't no fun if the homies can't have none, right? So we should be trying to throw opportunities at other people, but then we should also be looking at folks that are coming up and looking at things that they might not be able to see in themselves. Because she asked you a question, what are you doing with yourself? It's something she saw in you washing dishes or how you carried yourself, that she was just like, this young man needs to be over here. I see more in him than he sees in himself. Because what you said a minute ago was, I got my 3 jobs, I got me a couple dollars in my pocket, I got me a car, I can kick it. You know, I'm 20, 21, that's all I need. You know what I'm saying? I got, you know.
Yeah. She put a stop to it, you know.
She put a stop to it, because, and it wasn't that she put a stop to your fun. It was the fact that she saw something more in you than you saw for yourself at that particular moment.
That's right. So, you know, and when I got up there, man, it reminded me of Kentucky State. I was comfortable, and I was just like, I walked out. I remember walking out, and I just shook my head like, man, she done got me taking these credits and everything. But the campus and the students up there were just so, you know, they just were warming. You know, it was a family environment, right down to the professors you saw walking across campus. A lot of the guys that I met that first day standing in line. See, back then, you couldn't register for class online. You had to stand in line, and you had to make sure that your classes lined up with the right times and everything. So you got a real quick introduction to meeting people, because you're just standing in line and you running across campus and trying to get the teachers to sign off and the professors to sign off on this stuff. So met some good folks and all that stuff. And then I just got to think, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna move on campus. I just decided to move on campus. Bumped in when I was in line with a good friend of mine to this day, Eddie, who lived in Denver, and we became roommates the whole rest of the time and everything. So that gave me somebody he kind of got there the same way I did. We were able to share some of the same experiences. He was originally from West Virginia and everything. And to this day, man, we just when we talk, we just always look and laugh at each other about how we got there. And you know, God was just following him, man. He was just making sure that the right people were put in place at the right time.
That is so interesting. Again, and I probably referenced it at least 100 times. You know, one of my favorite books is The Alchemist. And the premise behind The Alchemist is, as you pursue your personal legend, the universe conspires to help you along on your journey. But the whole premise is you have to start pursuing. So as you start walking down this journey, this thing that you're called to do, God opens up these doors and starts putting people in place to help usher you along. It's kind of like if your car is broke down on the side of the road, ain't nobody gonna stop to help you. They just gonna drive around you. But if you get out of your car and start pushing your car, you're gonna have somebody that's gonna pull over and jump out and help you push. So it's as you start walking, as you start doing something, and even in your case, working at Cracker Barrel, as you start simply carrying yourself as somebody who there's more in store for me, somebody's gonna notice that and say, hey boy, come here, let me talk to you for a second.
That's right. And that happened. There was one guy in particular. He was on the food line, and I cannot remember his name, man. But he was evidently, he was a pretty good athlete coming out of high school. He had ended up playing college football, got in a little trouble and had to do a little time. And we would just always be on the line. And I distinctly remember him even saying to me, he said, man, look, I done all, I'm about as far as I can go because I done messed up along the way. But you have a pretty good head on yourself. And don't let this place right here suck you in and as far as you're going to go. And when he said that, it wasn't too much longer that Mrs. Scott showed up out of nowhere. So I think about that a lot, especially though, when you walk around here and you look at these younger kids, like you say, but I think about that a lot and just see how, it's just how the timing of everything lined up, with him saying that, Mrs. Scott popping up, the supervisor that even when I was a janitor at night, we would talk a lot. And he would even tell me, man, I'm just doing it because I'm retired. You got a lot of life left in you. So you need to go out there and make sure that you get it done right and everything. So, things were always put in place for some reason, as long as I listened, to possibly succeed and everything. I had to listen. I had to listen.
Go ahead. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, I just said I had to listen. Yeah. Yes. So things were always put in place.
Dude, I'm going to tell you what's so crazy about just thinking about that. And again, we're speaking to Black men, we're speaking to leaders, we're speaking to fathers, speaking to, there's women that tune in too, because they like to hear what we're talking about. The reality is, fellas, no matter where you are in life, maybe you are a person who is, in your 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, listening to this conversation, and you feel like, I've done what I'm going to do in life. Now it's your time to go, and who can I pour into? Because like Frank just mentioned, dude, there was a brother on the line working with him that saw something in him and he was pouring into him. He met the lady who was in the admissions office at Knoxville College, who would come and eat breakfast with her husband all the time, who saw something in him, right? There were other people that he encountered along the way that saw things in him and he poured in. But what the biggest thing he just said was everything was laid out for him if he was willing to listen, right? Now, again, we all bump our heads. I know I done bumped my head numerous. I'm probably going to bump my head later today. You know what I'm saying? Like it is, it is what it is. But it's laid out if we listen, but we have to listen to what we're supposed to do and pour into those that are coming behind us. We, as the brothers, we learned about the bridge builder. We're building a bridge for those coming behind us. But how many of us, and this is like a come to Jesus moment for some folks, how many of you are trying to make life better for those coming behind you? I'm not talking just about your kids, but how many of you all see a young brother over there and pull him to the side and say, like, look here, man, I see something in you. I open up a door for you. Maybe I'll give you a job. Maybe I'll make a call for you. Whatever it is, I see more in you than you might see in yourself. How many of us take time out of our schedule to do that? Because Frank, you are a testament of that, brother.
Well, yeah, and it's very important to give back. I've often, two things I've lived by is, number one, I've always felt like, God will give you a blessing, but it's subtle. You have to pay attention. You every once in a while you might get that big bang blessing, but I think the majority of the time, the people that are put in front of you, the blessings that you're given, they're subtle. And once you pay attention, then you start getting to the bigger part of it. So I always believe in that and paying attention to things. And then giving back to other kids and stuff. I never have had to be worried about my kids, my two kids, me and their mother. We've never had to be worried about that. I've often had a concern about their friends, not that they were bad, but sometimes they just didn't come from the same situation as my two kids. My kids have been very blessed to have good home, to drive cars, to dress well. They never had to worry about, if they needed pocket money to go out. They have no concern about some of the stuff that some of their friends have. But I often wanted to make sure that their friends were okay. So the house was always open for them. If I had to try and help them out on some things that they needed, I would do that. If they just needed a listening ear so they can vent, so they could cry, so they can just be angry at certain things. But I always would turn around. I want to talk to them about their grades. I want to talk to them about their future and things of that nature as well. So that's part of that lifting as you climb. That's part of that giving back. That's part of the bridge builder. and all that stuff. So, and it's very important that we do that. I think back to my dad and my uncles. I'm coming from a little small town. Everybody was in the same town, but those guys and some neighbors, they would watch the kids. They would yank up a kid. They were always coaching. They would jump on you. They would hug you. They would praise you too. But back then, also, you might get a whooping along the way while you try
by everybody.
Yeah, man. So you got all that community involvement, I would call it, from folks that were in your neck of the woods and everything. So I just kind of do the same thing to a certain degree. With young kids, there's a lot of kids when they walking from school to home, they have to pass my place of business. And if they just walk in, there's nothing wrong with just, hey man, how was school today? Did you make all A's or all B's? And normally when you ask that, they just automatically kind of open up and they'll tell you that. And then you give them a word of encouragement and let them know, hey, I'm gonna be asking you now next time I see you. Don't dodge me. I'm gonna be looking for you. And sometimes that little bit of conversation right there can change a life or get them through a day. So I'm a believer of that.
Dude, I'm gonna tell you what's so interesting and so powerful about that is we sometimes overlook the small things, but the reality is those small things are in essence the major things, because those are the things that we ultimately remember and have the biggest impact. So I had this theory a while back. It's like we need to reframe or rename things and stop calling them the small things, because they're actually the really big things. So the little words of encouragement, when you see somebody that's struggling or down, just, having a conversation with them, like how you don't realize how many individuals you may have helped to keep from committing suicide because they were down that day because you lifted them. Like it's a real, people don't understand it. And very few, and I guess maybe unfortunately, very few people don't get the feedback on the back end that this conversation saved my life, or what you said to me helped me to not go and commit this crime, or what you said to me, or the time that you took with me allowed me to go and make amends with my parents or my siblings or whatever, or keep me from doing something crazy. Like, we don't realize even these seemingly small things have lasting impact. And so, because a lot of times we think that I can't make a big impact in somebody's life until I have millions of dollars to give, until I can have multiple commas and the money that I'm giving, I can't make an impact, or until I'm sitting on this platform with celebrities and all of that, I can't impact somebody's life. No, like Frank said, little kid walked by the shop. How was your day today? What's going on? What's on your mind? How you doing? What are you thinking about? You ever thought about this? Man, let me come in here and show you what I got going on. You ever thought about, owning your own spot? Like, let me show you. I am that dude. I am you 40 years ago. What's happening? Like, we got to start doing more of that.
Yeah. I agree with you on that, man, because you just don't know the effect. Now being older and everything, I even every once in a while will, from my probation days, somebody will walk in here that I had on the caseload and everything, and they've seen the sign and they'll walk in and wondered if it was me, and they'll just come and they'll just tell me, man, I appreciate what you've done. I honestly had to lock a few up, and they'll even say, man, if I would have listened to you, I probably wouldn't have got locked up. But they all say, hey, man, you was fair. You warned us, you was fair. You gave a few chances and everything. And they just, so that does my heart good, and especially when you see them, because when I see them now and you look at them, man, I wasn't that much older than they were. I mean, we only had about 4 or 5 years that separated us. I was just coming out of college, they were right there getting ready to cross over into adulthood and everything. So I was the last stop for them before they get into the adult system. So weren't that much older, but it's good to always see folks like that, or maybe some kids I may have coached along the way, and you see them out and about and just talk to them, and they normally do say something where maybe just spending that time. So I'm a big proponent of just spending time. I will, I'll move a meeting around to go and talk to kids, because I just think there's that important, and you just don't know what impact you're going to make on somebody that day. And if you're really right there for a specific reason at that time, you just really don't know. At that, yeah. You
just got to take those moments, man. Take those moments. And you mentioned, again, kind of going back a little bit, you were a correction officer or parole officer right after college, but then eventually you transition into, you know, creating Shanklin and Sons flooring. Talk to me a little bit about how that came about. Like, how did you come up with, or how did you all, you know, build this company? Like, where did it all start from?
Well, it really originally started with my dad wanting to try and retire early.
Okay.
And we grew up, I mentioned my uncles that had the upholstery business, but they also did some carpet installation. So growing up, you know, I learned it as a young kid from my dad who helped my uncle. So I knew how to install carpet and sheet vinyl, which was the big thing at the time, because doing breaks from school and stuff, they had jobs, and me and my cousins would come and do it. Well, along the way, when we were trying to figure out what to do, you know, we had all these different businesses in our head, but the flooring business is what we knew. It was the least costly thing you could get involved in at the time. And we knew one thing that we had was the gift to gab. We could talk, we could sell. So all we had to do was just use our people skills. And that's how we got into it. And once we got into it, after about a year or so, my dad just decided that, hey man, I'm just gonna stay out here at this plant. I'll help you when I can. And we went through that whole ordeal. We had brought my brother into it, but he decided he wanted to go in the military. So he went on in the military and everything. So I just decided, well, I'm just gonna take it and run with it then. And I did that while working full time. And then after about 3 or 4 years, I met a guy when I was on vacation down in Georgia. And we finally got to the point where I bid it on the job and won the contract. And by the time I backed out how much it would cost for the material and labor and what's left, I just made up in my mind, I can live off the rest of it. If I don't do nothing else, this is enough for me to live if I got to go find another job. And I decided right there that I was going to quit. So when I came back the next day after finding out about that contract, I wouldn't advise nobody to do it, but I didn't give no notice. I just told them I quit. I
don't work these numbers out. I'm out.
I worked the numbers out all night and crushed them and crunched them. And I went over and over and over. And at the time, you know, my ex-wife and I, we were getting ready to have our first child. So she just said, just as long as we don't lose the house, or as long as we don't lose anything. And I remember telling her, I said, no, we ain't gonna lose nothing. Push come to shove, I'll go to McDonald's and flip a burger if we got to. And she said, all right. And that next morning I walked in with a box. And they were like, what you doing? I said, I quit. I just said it's just that easy. I just said it that easy. I didn't do no exit interview. I didn't do nothing. I quit.
I'm done.
And I walked out of there and I said to myself, boy, if this don't work out, I know I can't come back here. But so, and then along the way, I had already kind of put in for some other jobs. I was trying to leave there anyway. And along the way, right when I decided to do it, the railroad, Norfolk Southern, they're called. And I had made it to where I got hired to be a railroad police, which is a federal job. So I had accepted it. And then they were ready to send me down to training over in Quantico. And man, I didn't show up for the ride. And they called and called. And I just told them I just can't do it. I just felt like this is what I'm gonna try to do. And that was it. And that's what I did, man. So it's been going ever since. So I say, you know, 1999 is when I became a 100% full-time entrepreneur. 100%, 1999.
You know, it's interesting, man, how, you know, you think going through your journey, you came home, you know, due to take care, you know, family situations, right? To kind of, you know, be there for your mom and your dad, and then also create, you know, the opportunity for your younger siblings to then go to college. And then while there, you started working, but then there was always something inside of you. So again, it goes back to this whole notion of sometimes we don't know what we're in store for. And that's why it's so important to be in community with folks who have the intention of finding what's in you, and really they're on a mission to pull that thing out. You know, me as a personal development coach, that's what I do. It's just like, I can see stuff in people that they can't always see in themselves, and I'm here to help pull that thing out. It's not about creating something that ain't there. And so that's the thing that's interesting. these people saw something that was already there. They didn't see like, okay, this guy could be all of these things. No, they looked at you and said, there's something here, right? They poured into you, which led you to this position, which got you into college, which then you started working as a probation, correction officer, doing all your thing. But the stuff that you learned way back in the day opened up this window for this business that, that your dad and your brother were a part of. But the reality is your dad was like, I think I'm going back to this here job.
That's
And your
right.
brother said, I got other plans. And so
That's
then
right.
you were then left with this thing. But it goes back to this whole notion of that might have been the thing that was in you all along that never would have come out had you not listened, like you mentioned before,
That's
along
right.
the way.
Yeah, I agree with that and everything, because before I made that final decision, for some reason I picked up the phone to talk to my uncle about it. And he explained it just plain and simple. He just said, the family called me Frankie. He was just like, Frankie, I'm just gonna tell you, man, for some reason, when you got your own business, you can make $300 and you hold on to that $300 for a while. But if you work for somebody and you make $300, that $300 is gone in 24 hours. He said, I can't explain it, but it's just something about having your own business, making your own way, doing your own thing. And he never, and he's 82 years old now. He never in his life worked for anyone.
Wow.
And so any business type stuff, I would always just kind of talk to him, but he would just put it in just such easy explanation that you just felt good after talking to him about it. So once I got off the phone, I had already made up my mind. Hey, I'm just gonna go ahead and try. Just go ahead and try and see what happens, because I was scared that if I didn't, it would probably always eat at me. If I didn't try.
Dude, check this out. I'm gonna tell you, and fellas, I hope y'all are paying attention to that. A lot of times we don't think about with opportunity costs. We don't think about the what if I don't factor, right? If I don't do this, we always think about the risk of it. If I do it, it might hit the fan. But we don't understand that the thing that eats at you more is not the loss that you might have if the thing doesn't work out. It's this in the back of my mind. You know what? I didn't try. I didn't at least step out there, because I never know. I mean, I could be some monumental success and get in Black enterprise and have contracts all over the country, or, I could fall on my face. But the reality is I'm not going to know until I try. And so I encourage each one of y'all. Now, we might not encourage y'all to go and just say, quit your job.
I'm not going to encourage that now. That was definitely going out on a limb.
Yeah, that was going out on a limb. But maybe there are circumstances in which you do have to throw the deuces, right?
Well,
For some people.
Yeah, but you got to remember, back in that day, man, it wasn't like I was making any big money or anything like that. I mean, back in the day, the probation officer, I was only making about $14,000-15,000 a year. So, so you just thinking, I can go and catch a couple little part-time gigs and probably make a little bit more than that.
That's it.
So, there's things I kind of briefly thought about, but just left, man.
I love it, man. And so as you move forward, so you said 1999, so that's been 23 years now of you being a full-time entrepreneur, president, CEO of Shanklin and Sons Flooring. Talk to me a little bit about your journey and experience there and how that's come full circle to impact you as a dad.
Okay. Well, the journey, it definitely forced you to get up. You're only as good as what the dollar you make for the day. So you had to get up there. So that hard work ethic that I saw in my father, all of a sudden I was always a hard worker, but you had to definitely get up there, because you're talking about starting a business from ground zero. That's it, just zero. So I had to get out there, build up the customer base. It took some time to try and figure out what lane and direction I wanted to go in with it. There's different directions I just didn't know about. It was a lot of baptism by fire, because I could go get some advice on business, but there was no one that looked like me or anything of that nature that I could go talk to about this particular business. And my competitors were not going to talk to me about it. So, you had to just kind of will yourself through all of that type of stuff. That contract was good that I had, which led subsequently to other contracts and things of that nature. And I was able to ride a good wave for a long time And then around '08, you know, you had that economic impact. And it was devastating, man. And that's when I had to really, you know, make some decisions about what was I going to do. Was I going to keep it going? Was I going to get up every morning and really try to make it work? Or was I going to go and get a job? Because when that economic hit, it hit everything. So you had, it's just like you wake up one day and you had all this money in the bank and all of a sudden it was just gone because companies were calling in notes and loans. You had people that owed you money, but they didn't have money. And you could sit here and threaten to go to court all you want, but they didn't have the money. You owe people. So there was a whole lot of stuff that's going on. So I always tell folks, man, the days were long and the nights were short because you just stayed up all night trying to figure out what to do. But the one thing that it did do was it showed me that I'm tough as nails. And I really honestly believe that if I could make it through this and my kids see me make it through this, then they will believe that they can make it through anything. I didn't hide anything as far as everything was gravy. You know, we're doing this well and all that stuff. I never did hide it from them. But at the same time, I would have them when they were younger and they would sit there when I'm writing out bills and writing out checks and stuff like that at the time. I would have them sit down there with me and I'd let them write the check out. I would sign it and let them get used to writing a check out for X amount of dollars and things of that nature. And I think it has paid off over time. I would get them, you know, if I needed them to move furniture and pull carpet at a job, I would take them with them and pay them, let them do that stuff, let them see what hard work is like. I would let them do this stuff and let them know, hey, eventually now, while you need to learn a trade and everything, your goal ultimately it needs to be to own the business because you don't want to be down here doing this stuff all the time either. But it's good to be able to do it. So it's funny because my daughter kind of took hold of it faster than my son. My son, you know how he thought he was too pretty at one time to do this stuff. My daughter, she come ready, man. She would come ready and dressed and let's go, Dad, let's do it, you know. So we had to kind of nudge my son into it a little bit. But once he saw her get paid a little bit more than what he was doing, then he kicked in gear. So, you know,
that's it's interesting, man. Again, it just, you know, not hiding things from them when it comes to them actually seeing the process, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how valuable that is. Because it's interesting, you know, you're a couple years older than me, but the thing that's interesting about it,
more than a couple years now. You can't. I got you about more than a couple years.
Okay, well, you got. I got some gray in my beard. Folks watching the video see I got the gray in the beard now. But yeah.
Too.
Huh?
I said mine is showing up too.
But the thing that's interesting, we came up in an era where, you know, parents didn't talk to their kids about stuff, right? It was like when they started talking about money or when it was something grown folks business, oh, they send the kids into the other room. You know, It was funny. I was telling somebody, it's ironic. I don't think I knew what my mom made until I was an adult. You know, it was like, because we never talked about money. We never talked about what's the mortgage and what's the light bill and what's the this and what does this cost and what. We didn't talk about that. That was grown folks' business. And so, especially in the Black community, I think a lot of us grow up not understanding things, not due to any fault of our own, but it just wasn't shared with us. And so, as a father, I think that was so important for you to, in the midst of the economic crisis of 2008, for you to share some of that with your children so they can see, okay, yeah, it's great at sometimes, but then sometimes it ain't so great. And I'm going to open up and let you see what this costs and see what this looks like and see what, you know, this 60-day terms on this and 45-day terms on that. And you get to see all of it. And I think that helps for us to get perspective because we don't always, I mean, we want to see good stuff, but we also need to see the polarity of a situation so that we know that everything ain't always rosy.
And that's just a fact of life, period. You know, life is not always rosy. You're going to have some obstacles. You're going to have some turbulent times. You're going to have some moments where you're just sitting there and it just seems like everywhere you turn, you have things that you just have to work through. But, you know, it's like someone told me one time, you know, you just got to go through it and try to keep your faith and try to keep your strength and go through it because eventually it does turn around. And that's what happened there with the business and everything. You know, I still had bills to pay and just had to figure out how to keep them bills going, you know, and at the time, The kid's mother at the time, just fortunate enough that she was able to kind of, help through it too as well. And but I would talk to them kids, and they could, and there was no need of trying to hide it because they could see it. When I was walking in, you could see the stress on the face, and I was constantly in deep thought, just trying to figure out what to do and how to get through it and all that type of stuff. And they would ask you, "Daddy, what's wrong? Daddy, you okay?" And you didn't just give them the harsh truth of it, but you would just let them know, hey, there's some tough stuff going on. They don't know. They don't know what it means when the news person is talking about how bad the economy is and how bad the job market is. But they need to know because I think you need to let kids know that money doesn't grow on trees, and that parents, they work hard to provide for them. And there are times as a parent where you're making a decision whether to do something that you need to do as a parent, or do you need to take that money and do it for your kid. You got to make those choices, and 99% of parents will do it for their kid, but the parent is left with the remnant of it, because eventually you have to take it back around to it, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it also just kind of leaves an imprint on them, so when they do grow up, they're able to try to, when they have to make decisions like that, whether they have a family or whether it's just for themselves individually, they already understand it. They understand it. You just kind of trying to lead them there. So
man, it's powerful because I think we have to do a better job of showing that, there are sacrifices in every decision that you make, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, I am naturally an and person. I'm usually not one that's trying to, is this or that. I'm like, all right, how can we do both? Or where's the and in the situation? And in some cases, that is an option. But then there are circumstances in which you have to make a definitive choice to go left or to go right. And if I go right, these are the potential rewards and consequences. If I go left, these are the potential rewards and or consequences. But there are, points of inflection points in our life in which we do have to make these decisions. And there are rewards and consequences of every decision that we make. And I think that's something, and on a personal level, just kind of being transparent, that's something I have to do a better job of with my kids, because I'm an eternal optimist. I'm the one that sees the glass half full. I look at the opportunity. I try to block out the negativity, but I can't be false in how I operate, in the sense that I have to also be honest and say, like, look, okay, maybe daddy ain't feeling great today. Okay. Because I'm the one that, even if I could be sick as a dog and I'm like, oh, I'm good, let's go. I'm just going to push through it, and I'm not being genuine. And I think that does a disservice to my kids as well, because they don't see that dad is not Superman, right? They don't see that dad got issues at times, and I got struggles and challenges and stuff that I get frustrated with, and he says the wrong thing. They don't, if I hide those things, I do them a disservice, because then what happens when they're faced with a challenge? They think that everything's supposed to be rosy. So I appreciate you sharing that, because for me as a father, that's something I have to work on, not to be negative, but I have to give more of a balanced view of life at times.
Well, that, and the reason it's like that, man, that's because, that's how we're taught. Black men, we take on our issues and a lot of everybody else's issues. And fortunate enough where you have a family and things of that nature, you end up taking on the family issues. You end up taking on, if there's a shortage of money, you're the one that's trying to figure out how to come up with that excess of money. If there's a problem around the house, 9 times out of 10, they just tell you, hey, the dishwasher don't work. Well, you got to figure out how to get the dishwasher to work. Hey, there's a fuse on, and you got to figure out who to get over there to do it. And then if there's a problem that goes on at school with your kids, well, you want to marching up there so you can make sure that this is going to be done right and fair. And put yourself online. So there's a lot of things that Black males and Black fathers take on outside of their own stuff, and it can be a weight on you and everything. So you do get into that little spot where you just you're just trying to take on so much of the load, and even when you don't feel well, you get up and do the things like you say and all that stuff. And to be honest, sometimes even as a Black father, you're not even too sure if you're appreciated for the stuff that you do, because they may not really understand, your family and friends may not really understand how much you're taking on and what you're trying to do to settle the stuff that you've taken on. So, that's just, how we were raised. At least that's how I was raised. My dad, looking back now, he took on a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And it was stuff that was even outside of his household. He was taking on a lot of stuff for his siblings, because he was one of the older kids. So they would just bring all their problems to him. So, so you just don't realize that stuff. So nowadays, our age group, I think we are trying to do a better job of showing that, hey, man, you don't have to necessarily be a steel curtain 100% of it. It's okay just to let someone know, hey, man, today is not the day. Let me just have a day to get my head together, and then we'll pick it on back up and all that stuff. So,
I'm gonna tell you what's so powerful about what you just said there, because we're now in this environment in which self-care is basically on the forefront of the conversation, especially with men. So for the longest time, to your point, we were taught to bury it. Man, we don't cry. Man, we don't do that. Man, we don't. Man, dude, look, suck it up. You better man up. You can get out there and figure this thing out. And I think that was to our detriment to an extent, because we then don't have a release, or we don't have an opportunity to be honest. And so we just bottle this thing up, and you bottle it up, and you think about a soda that somebody's shaking. Eventually that top gonna come off and it's gonna go everywhere. And that's where you look at some of us having issues, circumstances, or situations in which there is a blow up, and that blow up could have been avoided if maybe we have kind of taken some of the pressure valve, released the pressure valve a little bit by having time, having space, having self-care. I mean, even things like therapy and counselors and, coaches, and having an opportunity to have folks who are not your yes men, who are going to give it to you straight. Because, I mean, that's the other part. We surround ourselves, if we want to, with folks who just going to basically say, hey, dog, keep on going. Like, nah, bro, that ain't the move. We got to have some, nah, bro, that ain't the move, folks in our life as well, to kind of help us to release, get different perspective. And because when you know better, you do better. I don't begrudge my fathers and my grandfathers and great-grandfathers, because, again, they grew up in Jim Crow and segregation. And before that, it was slavery and all these different things. They didn't have the tools. Now we got the tools. We just got to use the tools.
Got to use them, and don't be scared to share them, and talk and express, what you had to go through. It's okay to cry. I grew up not crying and all that stuff. But hey, man, I'm gonna tell you something. If you ain't crying, you try having your own business, and you try to make it between paying your light bill at home, your light bill here. This thing's gonna bring you down to your knees, and it's gonna make you cry and all that stuff. And sometimes, and then once you cry, you get up, you feel a little bit better, and then you ready to go on again. Dude,
I'm gonna tell you what's crazy about that. So again, this is Black fathers now. Some brothers don't admit it publicly. I ain't talked to one brother that's a dad that said he ain't never cried. Because, man, just being a freaking daddy at some point, you might be in that closet by yourself, turn the shower on. You might be in there boo-hooing yourself.
You're gonna cry as a father. You will cry when you're mad about something that has to do with your kids. You're gonna cry when your kids are hurting.
Yes.
Your heart pours out for them, and you cry. You're gonna cry when you're happy. My family laughs at me to this day. I remember my daughter's 22 now, but when she graduated from preschool, it was just preschool. I was crying like a baby. And they just looked at me laughing. And I mean, I was crying and I was sweating. I was crying so hard.
It's real, dude. Let me tell you, we had a story like that. Like, we were at church, and it was my little girl Morgan. It was like the first little dance thing they did at church, and our pastor laughed because he looked over, and all the daddies on that front row were sitting there crying with their phones up, taking pictures. I was one of them. It's like, man, they're just boo-hooing. It's like, what?
You cry at that stuff. You cry watching them grow. You cry at their successes.
Yes.
You cry when they bump their head, but you're trying to get them through it, and everything. And that's just part of it. And they may not know you cry. Like you said, you may have to go in that closet. I used to go and just lock myself in the bathroom for a second and everything. But you're going to do that, man. And that's just part of the father stuff. And being a father and doing that stuff now, I'm sure my dad had shed some. He might have rolled around town to get away so you wouldn't see him. But that's just what fathers do, and that's just part of being a father, and it's okay, And you sometimes you sharing tears together, my son. we shared tears. It just, he was fortunate to play basketball out there at Oak Ridge, and they made it to the state. But when they lost, man, he just had a breakdown moment, man. And you just hurt for him. You just think back to all the hard work to get to where he is, and it just didn't get the ring or nothing like that. But you just sit there and you hug him while he crying, and then all of a sudden you start tearing up. That's just part of fatherhood. That's just part of fatherhood. I don't regret it. I don't resent it. And I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it. That's part of it.
And I'm gonna throw something in. I think this is a good way to kind of bring it full circle and wrap it up. We talked about the importance of narrative and telling the story and how we tell the story. And you mentioned something there that even though we never saw maybe our dads and our granddads cry, the reality is they probably cried. They just did it to themselves and they kept it to themselves. Now that we know better and do better, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we communicate that it's okay for the next generation. So maybe my son and my daughter seeing me being okay, getting emotional every so often, they grow up in a way in which, you know what, it's okay for me to show emotion. Now, I don't want emotions to lead me in how I operate, but it's okay for me to embrace these emotions that I have. But that comes from how we operate, the stories that we tell, and the things that we put on display. And dude, your life, your journey, what you've gone through, the ups, the downs, what you're doing as a dad, as a businessman, as you're impacting those that are coming behind you, as some of the investments and stuff you got going on in the community, man, I salute you, brother. And I encourage you to continue doing what you're doing because you're making a difference.
Well, I appreciate that, man, Mike. I'm also say you're making a difference also because by you having this podcast and highlighting Black males, see, we're not getting that as often. The media and people in general, they're quick to chastise Black males for not doing this, not doing that. But I would venture to say that there's more Black males and Black fathers that are doing the right thing, working hard at accepting the community and adopting the community so they can spread the love and their wisdom and things of that nature. And by you having your podcast, it allows us to share our stories and things like that. So I really appreciate you for giving the platform where we can talk about these things and all that, because I don't know of any other, platform like that where we can do this stuff and be open and not be scared just to say what we're going through and everything. Not that it's all easy, but it's good to talk about it, to try and share it so folks can get a reality of what it's like. So I do appreciate it.
No doubt, man. I appreciate you, brother. And as we leave out, man, is there, as far as like contact information, if people are interested in connected with Shanklin and Sons Flooring, if they in the Knoxville area, if you're doing stuff in other parts of the country, lay your stuff out there, man. How can folks reach out, connect with you, websites, whatever you got going on?
Yeah, man, you can just reach me as far as the flooring business. You can reach me at Shanklin and Sons Flooring. The phone number is 865-740-4390. The address is 1935 East Magnolia Avenue, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37917. And we service not only the Knoxville, Tennessee area, but we service the whole Georgia area and parts of North Carolina and Kentucky as well. And then also, hey, if you're in Knoxville and you're looking for a good place to eat some good food, come on down to the Magnolia Cafe. I'm one of the business owners of that one. And that's at 2405 East Magnolia Avenue, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37914. I'd just like to say that, this business and us, we purposely put the businesses in the East Knoxville community. We wanted to be a bright light and a pillar for, the Black community. And we recognized we could have put our business anywhere, but we made it a conscious decision to put our business, good or bad or indifferent, in the Black community. And as far as I'm concerned, this is where it's going to end, whenever my time is done with being in business and everything.
I love it, man. So y'all make sure to support Shanklin and Sons Flooring. Is there a website as well for Shanklin and Sons Flooring?
It's under construction, man. We totally took it down, man. It was outdated and all that type of stuff. Okay. But you give me about another 2 weeks, I think it'll be back up. Matter of fact, I got to talk to my webmaster there, which is another Black business as well. So
that's what it is.
We're big on using nothing but Black businesses to service all our needs and everything as well.
I love it. I love it. So we'll make sure to at least put the website in the show notes. So when people listen to this, because this is evergreen, it'll be out there for years to come. When they go to Shanklin and Sons Flooring website, you can get more on Frank Shanklin. If you got, some bids, some contracts, some stuff in Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, whatever, reach out to them. If you're in Knoxville, make sure to visit the Magnolia Cafe. Just open, a fresh spot, get some good food, have you a few beverages, come hang out and connect with, the movers and shakers in the Knoxville, Tennessee area. And then if you encounter my man Frank Shanklin and you didn't know about him already, let him know you heard about him on Black Fathers Now, and continue to encourage the brother to keep doing the doggone thing, because we need more brothers like this doing it and doing it right.
Well, man, I appreciate that. And I look forward to hearing some of your other guests and everything along the way as well, man. You really got a good thing going. Look
Appreciate
forward to watching and growing.
I appreciate it, man. Appreciate it, man. We receive all of that. We're going to keep this thing rolling. And so, as always, make sure to follow Black Fathers Now on social media. Anywhere you get podcasts, make sure to subscribe, share this thing out. Share this out with another brother, because this is going to help us become the best version of who we are in mass. And when we do that in mass, the world changes, because, brother, we influence the world. And until next time, y'all be blessed, well, and wise. And I'll holler at you. Peace.